Call of Duty Modern Warfare launches today across the world, and I'm sure most of you are excited about that. But hopefully you're taking a little bit of a break to get caught up not only on the Chicago reveal of their roster, but also the LA OpTic reveal of their roster. And how about this? Minnesota finds they're not only starting 5 to finish it off, but also 2 substitutes. We cover that and more coming up. COD fans, good to see you guys. Welcome back. I hope you guys are enjoying the new green screen setup. It's interesting to say the least for me. I've had this for a while, just never had a chance to use it. I felt like it was a time to kind of change up the look of the brand of what we're doing here, as well as kind of get those new graphics pumped out for you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Let's go ahead and dig into our conversation for today, which is talking about the Chicago roster reveal. Not really, I guess, official, but it's official, let's be honest with you guys. And then as well, the LA OpTic roster reveal also happened earlier today. Beyond that, Minnesota COD also adds their 5th and a Seam plus 2 subs to round out their final roster. And what are we going to expect from the rest of the squads that are still left out there that we haven't heard much from? Starting with Chicago, first and foremost, got to represent. I'll be at the Blackhawks game on Saturday. They'll be playing in North Carolina, so it's right around the corner for me, about 4 hours. So I'm going to be getting myself some Chicago love. We'll start there at the top. T2P back in action. In case you don't know what that means, it's Scump, it's formal, they're back, it's looking solid. These guys have been absolutely insane over the career, creating what essentially would come to be that OpTic dynasty as kind of a mainstay two-piece up until eventually they kind of separated ways through the time of World War II. Formal Scump back together, what does that mean? Well, you go back into their history, like I was mentioning, this team, it was insane. It was an insane squad, again, hinging off of Formal and Scump in tandem as the mainstay duo. In AW, it was pretty much all top 2 finishes for OpTic Gaming. Okay, seems about good. Good year for you, good year. But beyond that, almost all of Black Ops 3 was a flat-out W outside of their top 8 finish at World Championships. They won almost every single event that was there, with the exception of World Championships, and the same thing would continue in IW the year after. It wouldn't be until World War II would come around that things would start to fall apart, and of course OpTic had that kind of year to forget, I think is the best way of putting it. At least near the end, they had a really strong start. Then Stage 2 started to kick in, and they definitely lost their steam. Formal would go to Luminosity. He obviously stayed there for Black Ops 4, but now they'll be back together once again in Chicago. It's an absolutely disgusting mix. I think as far as established duos that we've seen in the history of Call of Duty, it would be hard to debate that this is the best duo that we've ever seen. I couldn't think of one that may be better, maybe Crim and Clayster during their time, but it wasn't nearly as lengthy or long as what we've seen so far out of Formal and Scump. I say that like it's a recent thing, but it's been ongoing for the last handful of years. But beyond that, you're also adding in Gunless, Arcides, and Envoy to that mix. Yikes, that's an eye-peeling roster. There's a lot of star potential and a number of members there. Of course, Formal and Scump together, superstar performers. Gunless, another superstar. Arcides coming to life as being a potential superstar AR with his wins not only at Miami during the CWL playoffs, but also, of course, winning a world championship. And Envoy very well could be one of the best SMG players from Black Ops 4 in a lot of people's minds. Who knows what that'll look like when it comes to Modern Warfare, but this is a star-studded roster. My only hesitation with this roster is that we've seen this before, where rosters get put together as star-studded rosters. They either start off really, really well and end up fizzling away, or they start off really, really slow and maybe eventually come to that form. You kind of look at that from OpTic, how they started last year versus 100 Thieves when they started last year, and then they kind of had that meeting in the middle, and then they kind of go opposite ways for the most part, with the exception of obviously OpTic finishing top 3 at World Championships. But still, it doesn't. My biggest thing about it, and what we have come to see with 5v5 Call of Duty over the last calendar year, going into our second full year of it, is that stars don't necessarily always shine, and it sometimes is more about how the team plays together rather than just how the individuals on a team play. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Again, you're looking at a really solid lineup here. One of the scariest for sure out of Chicago. Definitely looking really good. We're still unsure as far as the full brand or the reveal date for that brand will be, but we have kind of already gotten the idea that they will be the Huntsman. That's pretty much been confirmed, with at least some kind of an orange or like burnt orange, yellowish color as their main color. Not sure on the logo what that's going to look like yet. I'm hoping that it's going to be something good. You can't imagine a world where Hecz is going to sit there and allow a bad brand to go forward. There's just no way. He's got too much experience, too much pride when it comes to that kind of thing. The other thing too, this is the final Scump goodbye from OpTic as well. They put out a nice little release for him in the Chicago video. I think it just goes to show and encompasses the mentality and the vibe that this team is going to have. The personalities are pretty vastly different, I would say, but it's looking like a team that's going to be all about having fun and working together, which is really at the end of the day what you're really looking for. Moving over to the LA OpTic though, this is going to be an interesting one because first and foremost, based on the OpTic Gaming response to this and their publish on their Twitter of this roster, it looks like the LA OpTic logo is just going to be the OpTic logo. Now, personally, I am not 100% sure how I feel about it, but I am expecting that the OpTic Gaming logo that we know of it now will just be the OpTic Gaming logo for the LA team. That's what I'm expecting at this point in time. I don't know how I feel about that, personally, because it kind of feels like, oh, if we keep the OpTic name, maybe we'll keep some of the fan base that's currently there. I don't think that's necessarily going to play the way that they think it's going to. And it feels a little, I hesitate to use the word cheap, but I can't think of a word that I'm kind of looking for to best emphasize it. So it feels a little cheap to use the OpTic logo with an organization that has no history with OpTic and two players that are recent to OpTic that are going to be on this roster. Again, as you take a look at this roster as a whole, it's going to be JCap with Slasher and Kenny, and then keeping the OpTic name from Black Ops 4 into Modern Warfare will be Dashy and TJ Halley. Now again, this is the other two parts of that essentially battle up against Crimsix and Karma and TP, as we've kind of heard it from before, when it comes down to Scump and Dashy and TJ kind of having these, what Karma had put as the big egos, after they had already had some success in the early parts of Black Ops 4. But the biggest thing that I'm most looking for is not Dashy, not TJ, but I'm looking at JCap and Slasher as being the two linchpins of the success of this roster in specific. JCap holds some of the lengthiest pro experience in the league going into 2020. Slasher, similarly so, not as much, but he has got significant playing time with the majority of this roster, with really the exception of Dashy, which he has not really had a time to play with on a team really all that much. Considering the names that are involved, if you look at this, the history that these players have built, this team feels like it either could be insanely good or it might just sit run of the mill. And before you jump on me for saying that, the reason why I say that is if you look back at Black Ops 4 and World War II as well, some of these players have had extremely high moments. Of course, Kenny was Player of the Year, MVP, Rookie of the Year, Esports Award from his time at World War II and was a huge superstar, and then had a huge falling off at the beginning of Black Ops 4 until he eventually turned it around to be a core integral part of the team. I don't think a lot of people would say that he was the superstar of 100 Thieves, but he didn't need to be, and that's kind of why I feel like there's a little bit of a balance there. Kind of the same situation when it comes down to Dashy and TJ. TJ started off a little bit slow, Dashy started off really hot in Black Ops 4. They kind of swapped spots at one point in time in the middle of the season. They both kind of rode it out, just doing well. And again, I'm not sitting here saying that they're bad players, they played poorly. It's just they didn't have that tangible superstar performance that you were looking for at the end of the year. Slasher, again, I would say was probably the most consistent player on this roster from both World War II and Black Ops 4 as a whole. He was an integral part of the team, was a solid AR flex player for his squads, and put down the numbers. And again, statistics only mean so much when it comes down to a 5-on-5 game. And JCap, kind of the same story, right? He's got significant pro experience, a couple of great finishes, but also had a couple of very questionable moments during his time at Black Ops 4. So that's really kind of what I'm looking at when it comes to this LA OpTic roster, is that you hear these names and you go, damn, this is a veteran roster with a lot of experience, a lot of superstar potential. I wouldn't say that anyone on this roster, though, is a stapled superstar, like right now. There's a lot, I think all 5 of these players could be very close to breaking that niche, but I wouldn't say that as of right now that they are superstars from the Black Ops 4 year. Top 25? Absolutely. Top 10? Maybe a few. Top 5? I don't know. The conversation becomes a little bit hairy. Again, I'm not trying to throw shade at him. I'm just trying to let you know how I feel about the whole thing. And I don't know. I really hope that they find a way to kind of make their own unique brand here and don't just ride the tailcoats of something that's no longer there, because it feels, like I said, a little fabricated. I guess that's the best way of putting it. It's not necessarily cheap, but it feels fabricated. And then, of course, to finish things off here, Minnesota does finalize their full roster. Asim will come in as the 5th starter, and then you've got Exceed and Tiny in as subs. Reminder, just quickly, that each team needs to have at least 7 players of the potential maximum of 10 on their roster. They need to have at least 2 substitutes, and I plan on making a video here in the near future as far as who's the best available that hasn't been talked about yet. We'll do that more next week. But my biggest thing about this roster is the fact that you've got Exceed and Tiny, who have had great careers since their short time being qualified. Tiny had a great run in the last couple of events when it came to the open events. Exceed similarly so, getting himself to world championships. My biggest thing is that there is huge potential for this young talent to really showcase and shine. And I think they're actually in a roster where it wouldn't be unfeasible to see them potentially subbing in case someone's not performing. My biggest thing is that this roster for Minnesota does not have, I would say, probably any superstars on it. When you take a look at it, Silly, Assault, GodRx, Alex, Asim, starting 5. All players that have good experience. Of course, Assault is a champion from World War II. Silly is a champion from World War II. Those 2 guys together, super talented, but they don't really feel like they had the superstar potential from what they did in Black Ops 4. The biggest thing here is that there aren't any, I can't think of many holes with that starting 5 roster. All 5 players have been extremely consistent and have been performing at a high level throughout the entirety of their career. Do they have the individual pop-off that a Hugh might have or something like that? Maybe not, but as a team, these guys have shown that they can play very well together as part of a team, and I think, again, that's going to be one of the linchpins of why they might be successful in the future. So that's going to wrap up some of my thoughts as far as the 3 rosters that we have finalized. Coming up next, make sure you guys keep your eye on the Twitter, as on Monday we have something special planned. I'll be doing some more reveals and teases at that throughout the weekend. Speaking of, I'll actually be out of town for the weekend. I'll be up in Raleigh, like I mentioned, to watch the Blackhawks take on the Hurricanes. So I'll be gone for Saturday and probably the majority of Sunday as well. I'll hopefully be jumping on to get some games in. But then coming up next week, I want to do a full recap of every single roster that we know of, every single brand, and what we're going to be expecting for teams in the future. So make sure you guys already hit that subscribe button. Awesome, you rock. If you have not done so yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell to know in real time when my videos do pop up and get published. Until next time, though, again, hopefully you guys stay hydrated and have some fun with Modern Warfare, but I hope you keep holding it down. Later. Bye-bye.